Okay, let's open a word of prayer. Lord, thanks for the day. We pray that you'll bless our time together this morning in Jesus' name, amen. So I apologize for the late start. I haven't been feeling particularly well, so I was sitting back there debating whether I should even do this. So I'm going to try to go through a few things, and I may update it this week. Again, we talk about this incredible convergence of things that we're seeing and the rapidity with which things are happening quite a bit. So let me sort of tell you what I want to talk about. I don't know that I'll remember all of them. I got tied up on some other things late yesterday and didn't get I usually don't have my slides in order, let's be honest with it, because I work on things up, sometimes I'm up here. I was just spending 5 minutes cleaning up some mess in my slides. So I'm going to try to talk about a few things. I'm going to talk about COP28. I'm going to talk a little bit about AI, just some things that are going on in that particular space. And I apologize, you're going to see me jump around a little bit in my slides. And so I may talk about something, then I'll do something else, and I go back to something else. So this will be, maybe we should just call this prophecy ADD. Because maybe ADHD, I don't know if the H belongs in there or not, maybe it does. But so let me just start off with sharing something on my heart. As I've kind of was watching some videos of other people, and I watch a lot of videos. I do watch some other prophecy updates, and sometimes these videos are done by people that I know, they're friends, I respect them, but I don't agree with them. Maybe it's because I've had this long career as a lawyer where and I was a trial lawyer, I was a litigator. In litigation, because of the way our system is, it's an adversarial system. You present your position, somebody else presents their position. And I've often joked that, sometimes in the law, there are two sides to every story and they're both right. And it gets very difficult in some cases to sift through all of those facts. One thing that I've never done is I've never sat on a jury. I've tried many, many, many jury trials. And it's amazing to me when we work for years on a case to present our case. And so the whole case is boiled down to this one time you're going to get in front of the jury. And the case may last, 3 days, it may last 3 months, it may last 6 months. And at the end of the case, you present, if it's a jury trial, you present the case to the jury, and the jury goes back in their room and they sit there and they decide. Personally, for me, the most stressful time in my life is waiting for the jury to come back. And the ultimate of the stressful time, which I'm semi-retired now, I guess I probably will never have this, but the most stressful time is when the judge's bailiff comes in and says, we have a verdict. And from then until you get the verdict, it doesn't matter what the verdict is. You can win or lose. It's that waiting for the verdict. That's so stressful. And also while the jury is out sometimes, I remember I had a case over in Licking County here, and for 4 days we sat there while the jury deliberated, trying to decide this case. It was a chemical exposure case, and I was representing one of the defendants, a company that distributes products that has chemicals in it. And the jury came back with a question. And then they came back with another question. And so as a lawyer with multiple defendants, you're sitting there like, what does the jury think? Why did they listen to the evidence that we presented? Because they're always asking a question about something else. This happened every time we had a question from a jury. And you're wondering and then you start questioning whether you're competent. Like, did I do a good job? This is what they came up with out of this case? And I remember sitting over there for the case went to the jury on Monday, and on Thursday, they finally came back and said they had a verdict. And we won. It was a defense verdict. And of course, that was a big relief. But I had to sit in the courtroom for 4 days waiting on the jury to decide with other attorneys that represented other parties in the case, because you have to be there. And so I went to the jury and asked them afterwards, like, what did we do wrong? What took so long? What were you talking about back there? And the foreman of the jury said, well, Mr. Haller, we decided for your client 10 minutes after we went back. We were talking about one of the other defendants. We couldn't decide on one of the other defendants. I'm like, and it would have been nice to know that. But the point is that even in that case, which was bitterly fought, I had a very good relationship with the plaintiff's counsel, and we would go out and we'd have lunch together, and he was very wealthy. He had a plane, so he would fly me to depositions where my guy was going against his client, and we had a great friendship and relationship over decades. And sometimes I see in the prophecy community, I'm going to limit it to the prophecy community sometimes, is that we have different views. I've often joked there are 50,000, the statistic I hear thrown around is that there are 50,000 Christian denominations, which I don't believe, but it might be in the thousands. But if you go to eschatology, there's probably 80,000 different denominations because everybody has a nuance. And so I'll talk a little bit about one today, like my view, or one of the things I'm considering as the final Babylon. And when it happens, when I talk about this, people say, oh, well, you're just wrong. You're an apostate. You've fallen away from the faith because you don't agree that the Babylon is the Babylon that I think it is. And I had a long discussion with a guy. He's fairly well known in the Christian community. He's semi-retired now, and I had talked to him 25 years ago, and I was able to hook up with him this week, and we talk like old friends, like we've known each other. And this is the great thing about Christian brothers and sisters, is like you can pick up because you have this commonality. And one of the things I think, and I don't think I'm misrepresenting what he said, I'm not going to identify him. One of the things he said was sometimes in the prophecy community, we get so wrapped up in our particular point of view that we lack the ability to respond with grace to somebody else's point of view. And that's true. I struggle with it. I think we all struggle with it. And now sometimes it's right to respond with, man, you're way, way off base. I mean, you've completely lost your view of, certain Christian doctrines, whether it's the Trinity or something like that. But, sometimes in prophecy, they're not salvation issues. And I did listen to a conference that was people that I don't necessarily agree with. And one of the people they were talking about, the subject came up is, okay, Israel. We in the premillennial community have this love for Israel because we think that Israel is very important and that God made certain forever promises to Israel that still have to be fulfilled, and God is a God of his word. And if God is not going to keep his promises to Israel, why would we think he's going to keep his promises to us with regard to salvation and how salvation works? And I truly believe that. And I've said, though, you can make Israel an idol, but you can also use your theology to be very clever in bringing out Jew hatred, which is, as you can probably see, there's a lot of people who you thought were great Christian pastors and that type of thing, and they're just spewing this venom against Israel. And so somebody asked a question at this conference about, well, how should we respond? And I haven't gone back to look because I just caught like a minute of it, but I thought and I'm not going to identify the conference or the speaker, but I thought his response was really well. The person says, why these Zionists and these Israel, they reject Jesus. Why should we have anything to do with them? And the response of this person was, well, look, why would you want people, when you were rejecting Christ, to have responded to you that way? Why wouldn't you exercise some grace with respect to them? So anyway, I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think we need to exercise some grace. And again, I'm chief of the sinners here, sometimes not exercising grace. And I think sometimes like you need to talk to the person. Sometimes I think before you kind of jump to the conclusion. Sometimes. So I would just hope that we can do that, because you're going to hear things. I've been around the evangelical church, Christian church, for not quite 70 years. And I'm not quite 70 years old, which means I've been around it all my life. Dad was a pastor, and because of that, I got to meet a lot of people. And every now and then, those guys that I knew and respected and Dad respected and everything, they would sometimes say something that just didn't seem quite right. And then so the best way, I think, is to kind of follow up with them and say, well, what are you really saying, rather than jump on them. Now, look, there's times when listen, I know that Andy Stanley and that type of thing, I talk pretty strongly about, because I think that that's pretty clear where they're going, in that it's a sort of things on a salvation issue. And I think that's a different thing. So I don't know if that made any sense. It made perfect. Up in here, it's crystal clear. It's like 5K television, we used to have, remember those tube televisions? And now you look at one of those and it's like, how did we ever watch? It's so unclear. And then we got 720, then we have 4K, now 5K. And one thing I'm noticing, though, with photographs and video and stuff is I'm older, and the ultra high resolution isn't necessarily the most flattering thing in the world. Sometimes we ought to stop at 720p or 4K. The 5K is getting a little bit out there. So let's talk about a few things this week. And again, I want you to understand that when I also analyze this stuff, I sort of operate through a big grid of a lot of scripture. I don't share every scripture that is going through my head or that I've reviewed or anything like that. But understand there are some big, and I'm developing a list of, we're going to put up some short videos. We're going to try to edit stuff down to short videos and put those up. And so what I've done is I've developed a bit of a grid for the person who's helping us do that, to say, okay, this relates to this particular topic. Some of you remember, if you follow Chuck Missler and Koinonia House, he used to have this thing called strategic trends. There were like 10 of them that they looked at. So I took that list and I've kind of modified it a little bit. I didn't know that Koinonia House, I just haven't followed them for a while, stopped updating that stuff like 5 or 6 years ago. And that was great. I mean, it was a good grid to work from. So I look at things like Mark of the Beast technology, Israel, conflict, wars and rumors of wars, AI, which is related to Mark of the Beast technology, the economy, because we know that there's these economic disruptions going. If we look at what the seals and trumpets and bowl judgment, particularly the seal and trumpet judgments, relate to, there's going to be a lot of disruption in the world coming forward. And our exit, and none of us know our exit date, by the way, and we don't even know our exit method, so we always need to be ready to meet the Lord. But in that context, those things are not going to just pop up out of the ground at the last minute. They're going to be building up to this thing. So, for example, when we see prophecies that a third of the world dies, or there's, I think, the fourth trumpet, some fourth seal, people think a fourth of the world dies. I don't believe that. I think it's control over a fourth of the earth. But there are things like Islam. I mean, Islam's been around for 1,700 years now. It's not going away till the Lord returns. And so we can look at a lot of things, Bible prophecy, in light of that false religion being present in the last days. And then there's going to be this trend for globalism. So COP28, I thought this was sort of a perfect picture today of sort of how the climate people have approached this. The world will end in 1984, 90, 2000, now 2030. And we have all these things that are pushing towards 2030. I talked a little bit about at the COP28 meeting, the Pope and the head of the Sunni Muslim School of Theology at Al-Azhar University in Cairo had signed yet another agreement about a joint and common mission. One of the things we see in Revelation 17, 18, we see the woman riding the beast, we see the beast, we see Mystery Babylon, and it appears this is like all peoples of the earth are involved. So this is a global thing. It doesn't mean they're going to have complete global influence over everything, but that they're going to it's going to have worldwide influence. So we look at these things. So we have these globalist meetings. Now, every now and then somebody slips up, though, and sort of says the quiet part out loud. Now, this is a guy named Al-Jaber, Sultan Al-Jaber. He was the president of the COP28 meeting in Dubai, which is going on as we speak. It still has about a week to go. I think it ends up on Friday or Saturday. And he spoke at the conference the other day, and he said, and he was doing a Zoom call about his participation in the conference, and he's, I think, the energy minister for the United Arab Emirates. So he's kind of a big guy on fossil fuels. And he said, listen, there is no science behind demands for the phase out of fossil fuels unless you want to take the world back into caves. And we've talked about this over and over and over again. I've talked about this over and over again. There's a guy, Dave Walsh Energy on Getter, you can follow, and he talks about this, is that solar and wind are helpful, but they are not a replacement. You need something that's going to be on all the time. You need nuclear, and that's fossil fuel generated electricity. And everybody knows this. China's opening a new coal plant at least every other week for the next decade. And all over the world, there are literally thousands of energy plants that are all coal or gas-based that are being built. Why? Because there's this miracle of fossil fuels. It gives us a lot of energy. I was just thinking about this yesterday. I stopped to fill up my car at the gas station. By the way, $2.65 here in Ohio for regular unleaded. $2.65 for a gallon. And I was just thinking, like, I put this stuff in my car and I can go everywhere. It's almost like a miracle. And it works. And I don't know where that gasoline started out as oil in the ground and where it was refined and the trucks that brought it there. But I know what? It was there, and I put it in my car, and it works, and it gives me a lot of freedom. And so I think Al-Jaber was just recognizing is everybody else in the world wants what we have. We're not going to, just like on AI and the development of AI, we're not turning the clock back. And so we have to figure out how to deal with it. And in climate change, does the world appear to be getting warmer? It does in some respects. There's a lot of argument about that. It does seem like there's more extreme weather events than there used to be, but there have always been a lot of extreme weather events. I can remember going to school in Northeast Ohio in the fall when we started after Labor Day. By the way, we didn't start in the early part of August because we didn't have air conditioning, but I can remember going to school at 102 degrees and no air conditioning, no fans. It got a little bit warm in the classroom, but we lived and we didn't die. And it was a little bit easier to sit there at 102 than it would have been if it was 20. When I was in law school in 1970, the winter of 77, 78, we had the coal strike. Do you remember that? And they cut back. All the classrooms at Indiana University were set at 50 degrees. And so we're sitting in the classroom with gloves on trying to take notes with pens in law school. But we survived. By the way, I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to say it because I thought it was humorous. By the way, my wife will tell you this. Sometimes my humor, I enjoy it more than anybody else. Because sometimes I'll even tell myself the joke again, and I'll laugh because it was pretty good. So, Israel this week has started to pump seawater into Hamas tunnels. And I said, now the way the Israeli government ought to spin that and sell it to the public is, hey, we're just trying to help the issue of rising seas by pumping some of that rising seawater into the Hamas tunnels. We're helping to counteract the effects of climate change. But I don't know if Israel, and I can tell by your reaction is you don't think that's as funny as I thought it was. But now you're laughing. So anyway, so Al-Jabbar, he says this and everybody goes crazy. So here's a little bit of a later panel. I got this from The Guardian, and here's what he had to say in response. Oh, hang on a second here. I forgot one thing. I always have to switch over my system to the output. And there we go. Okay, let's hope this works this time.
Hey. Reports in The Guardian of your comments that there is no science behind calls to cut fossil fuels. Do you maintain this, and do you accept that language like this and talk of people living in caves could contribute to a loss of public confidence in this COP outside of the negotiating bubble here on site?
Let's talk delivery. Let's talk progress. Let's talk momentum and traction. Let's talk about facts on the ground. Let me just say this about the media reports, without naming anybody. The media reports on a conversation I had with a person I have a great deal of respect for, and that is Mary Robinson. And let me just clarify where I stand on the science. I hope this time it gets picked up, because what I'm saying today, you have access to all of my public engagements, it's there. I'm not going to say anything new. I honestly think that there is some confusion out there and misrepresentation and misinterpretation. And to address this question right, let me first introduce myself to you. I'm an engineer by background. It's the science and my respect to the science and my passion about the science, and it's about my conviction to the science that have enabled me to progress in my career. I have said over and over that the phase down and the phase out of fossil fuel is inevitable. In fact, it is essential. And this transition is, in fact, essential. And it needs to be orderly, fair, just, and responsible. And it needs to be well managed. So, allow me to say that I am quite surprised at the constant attempt to undermine
I think that's it. So, I think he's right. We may run out of gas and oil. I don't know. That's a debate that a lot of people have. I was talking to someone about that this week. They think the oil's being depleted and we're going to run out of oil very quickly, which is why they think that we're near the end of all this. I'm not sure that that's correct because there's other arguments the other way. But certainly we're at a very serious inflection point on a lot of that things. Another thing we're at an inflection point on, and this is artificial intelligence and how all of these things interrelate. And you're seeing a lot of development right now. I saw an article this week about quantum computing and some of the advancements that are being made there. And that's a whole nother level of computing. And if they're able to get that worked out, some of the issues they have there worked out, this whole computing thing and technology and AI is really going to take off in a way that I don't think we understand. Now, the federal government, they came out with, this is not the right, they came out with a thing to, well, they tried, I'll just mention this, anti-Semitism is blowing up all over the place. And so the government came out with a strategy a while back back in May to counter anti-Semitism, which is good. We want to be against that. But one of the things that they did in that, this shows how our government is, this is the publication, and they came up with a method. They were going to get all these people, we're going to marshal these things. And by the way, when things happened on October 7th, what did they immediately come out and talk about? Islamophobia, not the attacks. It's insanity. But here's one of the things that they're saying is they're going to use the Council on American Economic Relations to help fight anti-Semitism. That's like, I don't know if I can think of an analogy. That's like asking the fox to live in the hen house with the hens. This is Carol. And so this guy who's one of the co-chairmen of this, he gave a speech this week, and you can go to Memory TV, memorytv.org, and also on their YouTube channel. And they were able to pull down the video. There was an Americans for Palestine seminar meeting in Chicago a week ago, and he gave a speech. And in his speech, he said that he was happy to see the Palestinians break out of Gaza on the day they attacked Israel. It's clear that he said this. You can go watch the video. Now, I went, by the way, Memory pulled it, they put it on their website, and you can go watch it. And he said exactly what Memory said. And of course, he releases a statement and says, well, despite my clear remarks and anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian hate website, that's Memory, and they're not that, selective remarks from my speech out of context and splice them together to create a completely false meaning. Now listen, so what I did was I researched, I went to the Americans for Palestine YouTube channel, and they have all of the videos from that conference. Except one is missing. It's been taken down. So if his thing was taken out of context, it would seem to me that the best way to fight that would to be have the whole video up there so people like me could and others could watch it. But you can't. And so what he does is he just says, Memory lied, and I'm removing the evidence to prove that they did. That's problematic, very problematic. There was this week also in Congress, some university presidents got up, and I think her name is Elise Stefanik from New York, a Republican from New York, asked them, they were the presidents of Penn, MIT, and Harvard, about the really pretty nasty protests that are taking place on these campuses. And Jewish students don't feel safe. In fact, I saw a statistic this morning that 40% of Orthodox Jews in the United States are seriously considering moving to Israel because that's the only place they think they can feel safe, even in the context of a war going on. That says quite a bit. So here's a clip from that thing in Congress that took place about Wednesday or Thursday. And of course, now my thing is not going to play. Well, I don't have time to get it. You can find it on Twitter. And look, they clearly came out and they were asked questions about, well, do you think is this against your policy to have these students calling for intifada, calling for the genocide of Jewish people? And of course, they all said, well, it depends on the context. Really? What kind of context? Well, when it turns into action. Oh, so when they actually start to do the genocide, then it's against your policy. But calling for the genocide is not. Now, this is a tricky area because I'm all for free speech and that sort of thing. But there's a line there that I think they're crossing on this when people really, the mob sort of speaks. And so one of the people was President McGill from Penn. And she said, well, look, I'm really in favor of free speech. And I was kind of thinking about that when she was asking me the questions. Oh, really? That's what you thought? And so that's why he answered the questions the way he did. Well, she resigned either yesterday evening or today. She's gone from a very well-paying job at Penn. And she tried to say, well, I'm not against, free speech and that type. Oh, really? You're not against free speech? What did you do to students who thought it was a bad idea to have a boy pretending to be a girl swimming on your swim team, and they criticized that? How did you react to that? Again, I will stand by this. If hypocrisy was water, the world would drown. So she's gone. There was a guy who threatened to withdraw a $100 million contribution from Penn. People are threatening to withdraw contributions from Harvard and MIT as a result of the way their presidents, who did the exact same thing. And the president at Harvard, you can go back and look into her career. She's really gone after people with a vengeance, and now they're coming after her. And it's like, well, you're mistreating me. It's so mean. You're being mean to me, a woman. But you don't have any problem having destroyed careers in the past for really no reasons. People who maybe question the scientific basis of articles that were published in various peer-reviewed journals, you went out and you got the person who questioned why they were using bad science and bad methodology, you got them fired. Now all of a sudden it's a big problem. So you can find all of those things. McGill is out. I don't know if her name is Gay at Harvard, and I forget the lady who's president at MIT. But this is somebody said, I thought this was an interesting thing. This is mind context, that's what we rely on now for these things. So let's go to Israel. And this is where my slides get really out of order. Okay. So Israel, they're still in this battle in Gaza. They're going down south. They think they've located where this head of Hamas is, named Sinwar, the Hamas leader in Gaza. The political affairs director of Hamas is a multi-billionaire, and he lives in Qatar in luxury. If you don't think that's go, his name is Hania. Look him up, and you'll see that you only have a beard like that if you go to an expensive barber every day of your life to get it trimmed. And look, what's happening is terrible. People are being killed on both sides. Israel's now lost in the Gaza operation just under 100 soldiers. And these are all, every morning people wake up in Israel and they get the list of people after families have been notified. If you go to my YouTube channel, Fellowship Bible Chapel YouTube channel, earlier this week I did a couple of interviews. I think I did them on Wednesday with Brian Schrager. That one's about an hour. Brian's a Christian friend, lives in Israel. We talked about the issues and what he's seeing and what he's experienced. And the other was Jonathan Feldstein. Jonathan is Orthodox Jewish man, lives in Efrat. I met him exactly a year ago that we were at the Christian Media Summit. In fact, on the Wednesday, it was 1 year to the day that they had taken us down to the Urban Warfare Training Center near Gaza, and also to the kibbutz. I believe it's the kibbutz that's nearest to the Gaza border fence. And there were some people killed there in the attack. Other people survived. They seemed, because they'd been subject to some rocket attacks before and had people killed there. I think their security was a little bit better than other kibbutzes in the area. And so the people survived. But they're disrupted because they don't live there now. There's at least 120,000 to 200,000 people in Israel internally displaced. And this is a problem. They've left, they have nothing. They have nothing. They left everything in Gaza. They're in hotels. They don't have schools for their kids. They don't have toys for their kids. And as Brian Schrager said in my interview with him, there's a whole system that's been set up to help those people. And you can find, if you look for it, charitable organizations if you want to contribute to that. But the interesting thing was with Jonathan Feldstein. He runs an organization called Genesis123.co, and he does podcasts and articles. And I mentioned that a year ago I had been down in Efrat and went to Shabbat dinner at some friends. He goes, "Oh, well, I live in Efrat too." And I told him who, and he said, "Oh, I know them. They're friends of mine." He goes, "Next time you come to Israel, you come to Shabbat at my house." And there's a very interesting thing going on here, and I'm still trying to process, okay, how do we Christians deal with it? Because some Christians will say, well, they're Zionists, they reject Jesus, we should just let them alone and forget about them. I don't accept that. And look, there's some of them that are really hardcore and obnoxious, and you don't need that in your life, so don't do that. But Jonathan's not that way. Jonathan is very kind and gracious, but I told him, I said, I remembered very specifically at Shabbat, they do a Torah portion, and it's on a yearly cycle. So he said, well, I told him what the portion was. It was in Genesis, the story of Joseph being sold into slavery by his brothers. He goes, "Oh, my son is 25. He will be 25 tomorrow. His brigade, he's in the IDF, just entered Gaza today. So please pray for him." So pray for Jonathan's son and pray for all the soldiers in there, that this thing will get over with pretty quickly. And he said, because he was born this week, the Torah portion that would be read at his bar mitzvah was this portion about Joseph being sold into slavery by his brothers. So if you go to Times of Israel and you look for Jonathan Feldstein, Feldstein, you can find the article that he finished writing after our conversation. He said, "Now I know what Jacob felt like." Because he said, it's so interesting, John, that when we have these Torah portions, that they so often relate to things in our lives. And he said, now I'm asking my rabbi, when Joseph was sold into slavery, the trade route went through Gaza. Did Joseph go through Gaza on his way to Egypt? And the answer is he likely did. But he said, I also look at it how Jacob reacted to losing his son, his favorite son, and now I know how Jacob felt because my son is now in Gaza in a war. But this is what we have to do. But he says you read every morning the names of people, and sometimes they're sons of friends, and everybody's going to funeral after funeral. This week, Ghazi Eisenkot, who is in the war cabinet, former head of the Israeli Defense Force, his son was killed in Gaza. They had the funeral the other day, and all the politicians were there, and they televised it, very moving. And Eisenkot, his nephew, was killed the next day. So he lost his son and a nephew this week. This is what's happening in Israel. There are over about 400 soldiers dead, or I think close to 500, because 300 and some were killed in the attack on October 7th. But I think the number is 93 or 97 that's been killed so far. So it's a very difficult situation that they're facing now. The word out of Israel is that they expect that they hope to be finished with the Gaza operation in, I've heard 2 months, but there was an article in the Jerusalem Post this morning saying 6 to 7 weeks. They have started flooding some of the tunnels. Eisenkot's son, by the way, was in a brigade. They had secured a tunnel entrance, thought everything was fine, and then a Hamas terrorist popped up out of the tunnel and shot and killed him. And this is what's happening. It's a very close quarters war. I don't know if this one will play or not. For some reason, my videos are not playing. So this is a video that I saw described for the video. These are soldiers in Gaza. And when we were there a year ago, they took us down, just a year ago this week, to the Urban Warfare Training Center. And they drove a tank by us and everything so we could see what that looked like. It very much looked like this tank. And the buildings and everything, they had a mock-up of Gaza City. And you can see here in this video, if it was working, that this is a very difficult urban fighting situation. So as they were showing this here, so people say, well, why did they destroy the building? Because if they don't destroy the building in this video, they're in a square with tall buildings, 3, 4, 5 stories around, which are all over Gaza, because it's densely populated, and people are popping out, firing snipers at them. They pop up here, they pop up here, they pop up here, and these soldiers they're in there in the midst of all of this, and they have to deal with it. It's very, very difficult fighting. So that they've only had under 100 killed so far in several weeks, a month of being in there is, to me, that's sort of a miracle. But as Jonathan and Brian both said in my interviews with them, one of the most amazing things is to see the unity of the Israeli people about what they have to do. Our government seems to be fighting and pushing them the other way, and that's a problem. Let's see here. So here's just some articles that I found. Israel lauds U.S., but Palestinians accuse it of genocide for vetoing UN security ceasefire call. There was an operation to rescue IDF or hostages by the IDF that failed, and one of the captives was murdered after that. Hamas says, well, he got killed during the raid. And there's just this constant back and forth. Here's the Jerusalem Post from this morning. Main Gaza fighting could conclude in 4 to 7 weeks. Also, Eisenkot's nephew was killed. Israel says U.S. has not set a deadline for the end of the war, but we're really pushing Israel to stop. And I don't know how long is U.S. support for that. And so everybody's like, oh, look at how cruel Israel's being. And they never talk about what happened on October 7th. You see anti-Semitic protests all over the place. This was in one of the articles, this is in the Times of London yesterday or today. 1 in 5 in a poll of young Americans say the Holocaust is just a myth. This is a problem, and this lays on the doorstep of people like the presidents of Harvard, MIT, and Penn, because they've not been treated. This other article here, Israeli hostages most brutally treated, say Free Thai workers. So a lot of the people that were taken hostage were from Thailand. They were immigrants who work in the agriculture or in the kibbutzes down there in the south of Israel. And they came back and said they're really mistreating the soldiers. There was one girl, she had been shot in the leg. My understanding is when they repaired her foot, they put it on backwards. People have said they were operated on without anesthesia. There was pictures yesterday of a bunch of Hamas people and people in the area that were stripped down to their underwear. And look at how cruel they are. Look at how mean Israel is. But there's very good reason why they do that, because a lot of them wear suicide vests. So if you strip somebody down, you can make sure that you've gotten this suicide vest. Oh, it's humiliating and all this. Look, it's war, friends. And it's war where people are fighting. There was a situation where rockets were fired into Israel yesterday, and there's video that shows that they were fired from next to relief tents that have been set up in the south of Gaza for people to live in. So they fired the rockets right next to the tents where people have evacuated to. They did that for a person. They're using human shields. And by the way, stripping the soldiers down, what about all the people they stripped naked and paraded through Gaza in the back of trucks on October 7th? So the propaganda is just completely off the charts. This is an article in the Friday's Jerusalem Post about Israel needs to do a better job telling everybody exactly what happened. So that's interesting. Now, there are some other things. So this is now, by the way, this is a news source I check on Twitter, Iran Observer. So they're pro-Iranian. So understand you're going to get a lot of propaganda from them. So they look at what's going on and the fact that the U.S. hasn't really responded. And this is what they say. The reason that the U.S. has not attacked Yemen is that it does not want to endanger Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar. So it's Iranian propaganda. If U.S. attacks us, we're going after all these other people because they've supported the U.S. Saudi Arabia has no appetite for another war with Yemen, and a ceasefire is in place. The Houthis have already proved in the past that they are ready to attack these countries with ballistic missiles. The U.S. has thousands of soldiers stationed in these countries. If the U.S. attacks the Houthis, their base will become a target. And so there have been attacks in the Red Sea. I do have some maps on that I want to show you what that's not the map. Okay, so there are some choke points that are important to world trade. So you have the Straits of Hormuz up at the top. Here we go. That's the Straits of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf, and that strait, that choke point there, and a large chunk of the world's oil comes through that strait, through that little choke point there. That's 33 miles wide. So that's not, you may have noticed the Earth is pretty big, right? Although I'm sure this is a sidebar. When I go back to places where I grew up in childhood, don't they seem a lot smaller than they used to be? Like everything's closer? Because it seemed like, I remember Pam and I went back to Johnstown, PA, and I said, well, let's drive down past the church where Dad was pastor. I was there for a 25th high school reunion. She said, well, how long will that take? And I said, oh, probably 20 minutes. That's like 4.5 minutes to get down the hill down to downtown Johnstown. And I'm like, I know my size relative to the size of the Earth has changed over the years, but it's still a pretty big ratio. And I don't understand that. So 33 miles is nothing. But the other choke point is even, and by the way, you can see with these satellite maps, so this is Dubai, and you can see that's just that inset that popped up. And you remember those islands that they built? You can see those from the satellite. They're pretty big. And it took Dubai to do that. Now the others is the Straits of Maghreb, which is down in the southwest corner of the Arabian Peninsula. And it's next to Africa. You see the Horn of Africa there where Somalia is, and then this country called Djibouti, which is on the on the west side of the Straits in East Africa. And then you see Yemen, and that choke point is 10 miles wide. That's nothing. So what you'll see is that there are major waterways that are affected by this war. So the busiest shipping lanes in the world, English Channel, Straits of Malacca, Malaysia and Indonesia, Suez Canal, Panama Canal, and Straits of Hormuz. These are the biggest shipping channels in the world. So two of them, for the Suez Canal and the Straits of Hormuz are there because at the north end of the Straits of Hormuz is the the Suez Canal. So you have the Red Sea on the left, you have the Gulf of Aqaba on the right. It goes up to Eilat. This goes up to the Suez Canal. And so what's happening is that the Houthis are attacking ships in the Red Sea to try to shut down shipping, because this has a big impact. And I have some statistics. I believe that on an annual basis, about 25% of the world's oil goes through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. So if that's shut down, that has a big impact, because it can take a week or 2 weeks, 9 days to 2 weeks longer to go all the way around Africa to bring that stuff to bear. So that's a important thing. I do have a lot. I said in my Facebook page I was going to talk about Neom and maybe Babylon, and I think I'm going to forego that since I got a late start today. I will update that. I have a bunch of scripture that I want to throw in. Remember this, I'll just sort of preview it. I've talked about it quite a bit. This city called Neom. This is at the south end of, let's see. So if you go to the Sinai Peninsula, the bottom of the Sinai Peninsula there in the middle, to the right, that's Neom. This is a big city. They're spending billions, maybe trillions of dollars building this thing. And if you go to satellite maps, so this is the ArcGIS website. They have a satellite map with imagery. You can see that they're starting to excavate Neom. The city is going to be 100 miles long through the desert there. So you see where you can see the excavations going place. Here, and this may be an important city. Here was an interview with some of the architects.
What are they thinking?
If it succeeds, it will be the new Babylon, so to speak.
So if it succeeds, it will be the new Babylon. And so you can see this city, 1,500 feet wide, tall on each side, about 600 feet across. It's kind of goofy, very dystopian. Everything will be in a 3-minute walk. And it's in a desert, a wilderness, which is what they talked about with what John talks about in Revelation chapter 18. That I was called away into the wilderness to look at this. So and I'll talk about some of the different views of Babylon when I get around to it. But you can see that they're taking this city and they're compressing it 200 meters wide, 800 meters tall, and 100 miles long. And everything's going to be within a 5-minute to 8-minute walk. And they're going to have these different modules, 80,000 people per module. They expect this to eventually be 9 million people now. So I think this is a candidate for Babylon of the end times. People disagree with me, and that's fine, okay? It's not a fact. I'm not stating it as fact. I'm saying this is one of the things I consider. Some people think Babylon will be rebuilt in Iraq. And maybe it will be. Here's a little closer thing. You can kind of see the foundation work being done, starting at the west end of this. And so I'll only say when we look at the story of the Tower of Babel, which I think is a pattern for what we're going to see in the end time with regard to this final Babylon, the Lord intervened before it was finished. So I don't think they're going to finish Neom before the Lord returns. And it's very dystopian if it is Babylon. And even if it's not, I don't think they're going to finish it before the Lord returns. I think we're that close. But that's a problem. But with regard to this shipping thing, this is a great article by Jonathan Spire in the Friday's Jerusalem Post. There's also an article by him going into Gaza with a group of soldiers in the Friday Jerusalem Post. You might want to read those. I think Jonathan's the best, if not close to the best, if not the best, Middle East war correspondent on planet Earth. He really knows a lot about what's going on. So pay attention to him. I'll talk more about Neom and Babylon. So I just want to go with one more thing here. And that's this. So there's the war in Ukraine continues. The Europeans are saying, Ukraine's not doing they're not doing very good. The war may be over soon. And Putin knows this. Putin has been somewhat isolated. He hasn't really gone too many places over the past almost 2 years now since Russia invaded Ukraine. And Russia's sort of taken the position that, well, we'll wait them out. We have 3.5 times as many people. We have a lot more soldiers. And, we can lose more of theirs than they can lose of theirs. And they're running out of ammunition and everything. So I don't know if the war will go on much longer. Russia will wait it out. But Putin took trips this week, and I think it's just sort of significant when we look at the alliances of Ezekiel 38 and 39 and some of the things that come together. Russia, I think Central Asia, I've long said that Central Asia and the Turkmen people in that region are probably involved in this Gog-Magog invasion that comes from the north into Israel in the last days. I know Turkey's involved. We know Persia in some form is involved. So Putin took a trip. First trip he took was he went to Saudi Arabia. And here is the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman waiting for Putin to show up. And remember, everybody says, oh, Putin's dying. And then he goes and sits on stage for 4 hours at a boring conference and doesn't fall asleep and doesn't appear, from what I could see, get up to go to the bathroom or anything, which is pretty amazing for a guy who's 71. So here he comes with his good buddy, Mohammed bin Salman. And they're going to go in and they're going to have a receiving line.
Glad to see you. Welcome to Riyadh.
I have to shut the sound off of that. Look, they get the really good handshake. Yeah, my buddy, a good man. And now they're going to go to the receiving line. And in the receiving line, you're going to see a very interesting character who's gone on the trip with Putin. Now he's greeting the Soviet or the Saudi Arabian dignitaries. And then the favor's going to switch. Pretty soon you're going to see Mohammed bin Salman. He's going to start shaking hands with, there's the foreign minister of Saudi Arabia. And now Mohammed bin Salman's going to start shaking hands with there's Lavrov and dignitaries. You're going to get to the guy that I think is very interesting, that he's on the trip. It's the guy with the beard coming up. His name is Kadyrov. He is the head of Chechnya, which is a Muslim region. There he is right there, Kadyrov. And he is a brutal, brutal guy. You remember the Chechen situation where the kids in the school, that was back when there were wars in Chechnya. His father rose to power. They were very much against Russia, but then he's become very pro-Russian. He's very close to Putin. And he's just brutal. I mean, go read about him. And so they had this big meeting, and I think this is a repeat. Now, remember, Putin and Mohammed bin Salman, they have a pretty good relationship. Look at that ain't the handshake that Joe Biden got. What did they get? Kind of a fist bump or something? An elbow bump? Remember, about 5 years ago, there was a conference, and here's Putin and Mohammed bin Salman, high five, man, and ha ha ha, we're good buds. And I don't remember what that conference was, but I dug it out of my thing. Yeah, man, my man, yeah. So this is Kadyrov. And so Putin went to Saudi Arabia. Before that, he had gone to the United Arab Emirates. And I always like these rooms that they have these meetings in. It's sort of like very intimate, close quarters meetings. There's those guys. I think those are those guys. But he also went to the United Arab Emirates. They had a big flyover to recognize him. Then he went to Saudi Arabia. And he was going to stop in Iran, but he texted, I can't do that. I've got some friends. I've got to get back to Russia. But then the next day, here this guy shows up in Moscow to have a meeting with Putin. That is Raisi, the president of Iran. And they talked about a lot of different things. They had a long meeting. There's the foreign minister of Iran on the left. So Putin was everywhere this week. They had the meetings, going through the big golden doors at the Kremlin. And one of the things they talked about was this, they sort of cemented this Eurasian economic group. Well, that's all the Stan republics that I've talked about for so many years. The Muslim used to be part of Russia. The Muslim Stan republics are all part of this confederation now. And Putin went back. He also, either the same day or the next day, he had a meeting with the Crown Prince of Oman. So he was very, very busy. In fact, he even had time to step back and say, hey, I'm going to have a fifth term. He's going to run, the only prior Russian leader who's run for 5 terms. You didn't know he ran for 5 terms was Stalin. He was always democratically elected. But I just think this is a very significant thing that's talked about. So look, I'm going to talk more about NEOM in a future update or a midweek. And and I appreciate you listening. And by the way, go check those out. Go to Times of Israel, read Jonathan Feldstein's article, watch the videos with Brian and Jonathan, and we'll talk more. So let's pray. We'll leave. Lord, thanks so much for your day. Pray you'll bless us this week. Pray you'll give us opportunities to share the gospel with those around us. In Jesus' name, amen.